"Get back from Europe or you are fired!" the new VP screamed into my personal phone while I sat peacefully at a cobblestone cafe in Prague, sipping coffee that actually tasted like heaven. I sighed deeply watching tourists snap photos of the medieval architecture around me. The irony was not lost on me that Tyler Branson, who could not even figure out how to reset his own email password, was threatening to fire the person who built every single system keeping his company alive. "Okay," I replied calmly. "I just logged out. You have 30 minutes before the data center cooling resets to 0. Tell your dad to buy fire extinguishers. Good luck." The line went silent, except for Tyler's heavy breathing. I could practically hear his brain struggling to process what I had just said. 5 years ago, when I started at Meridian Technologies as a junior systems administrator, the company was running on outdated servers held together with prayer and duct tape. Their idea of cybersecurity was making everyone change their passwords to include an exclamation point. I spent countless nights rebuilding their entire infrastructure from scratch, designing redundant systems, implementing security protocols that actually worked, and creating backup solutions that could withstand everything from power outages to natural disasters. My promotion to senior systems administrator 3 months ago felt like recognition for all those late nights and weekend emergency calls. This European vacation was supposed to celebrate that achievement. I had earned every single day of these 2 weeks, having worked through my previous 3 vacation requests, when critical projects demanded my attention. The timing seemed perfect when I booked the trip. Little did I know that Harold Branson, one of our biggest investors, would use my absence as an opportunity to install his son Tyler as vice president of operations. Tyler Branson graduated from a prestigious business school where his daddy donated enough money to name a building. His resume listed internships at companies that Harold either owned or heavily invested in. Tyler had never worked a real job where his last name did not open doors or solve problems. When he arrived at Meridian Technologies 3 weeks ago, he immediately started what he called efficiency improvements. These improvements mostly involved second-guessing every decision made by department heads who had been successfully running their operations for years. My assistant Sarah called me during my second day in Prague, her voice shaking with frustration. Tyler had summoned her to his office and demanded detailed explanations for every piece of software installed on the network. When Sarah tried to explain that certain servers required specific configurations to maintain stability, Tyler cut her off and accused her of making things unnecessarily complicated to justify her position. He informed her that modern technology should be simple enough for anyone to understand and manage. Yesterday, Sarah was fired for insubordination. Her crime was refusing to provide Tyler with administrative access to critical financial systems without proper authorization from the CEO or CFO. Sarah had worked at Meridian for 8 years and understood that those protocols existed for legal and security reasons. Tyler saw her refusal as a personal challenge to his authority. He terminated her employment effective immediately and had security escort her from the building as if she were some kind of criminal. My phone buzzed with the text from Jake Morrison, our junior technician, who was now apparently running the entire IT department single-handedly. Tyler fired Dave from network security this morning. Says we are overstaffed and overpaid. He wants all passwords changed and given to him personally for security oversight. Jake had been with us for only 18 months, but he was sharp and dedicated. The fact that Tyler expected him to handle the workload of 4 experienced professionals showed just how little Tyler understood about technology infrastructure. I scrolled through more messages that had accumulated while I was exploring Prague's beautiful bridges and historic squares. Tyler had fired Angela from database management for questioning his directive to migrate everything to a cheaper cloud service that lacked proper encryption standards. He eliminated the entire cybersecurity consultant contract, claiming it was an unnecessary expense. He canceled our hardware maintenance agreements to save money, apparently unaware that our servers were complex enough to require specialized support when problems arose. The pattern became clear as I read message after message from remaining staff members. Tyler was systematically dismantling every safeguard and protocol I had spent years implementing. He viewed the IT department as an expensive burden rather than the foundation that enabled every other department to function. His business school education had taught him to see technology as a commodity that could be easily replaced with cheaper alternatives. My phone rang again, and Tyler's voice exploded through the speaker before I could even say hello. "Belinda, I do not know what games you think you are playing, but you will fix this situation immediately. I tried to access the email system to send communications to all department heads, and it rejected my login credentials. Your people clearly sabotaged the system before you left, and I will not tolerate this kind of insubordination." I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching a street musician play violin near the statue of St. John of Nepomuk. "Tyler, the system did not reject your credentials because of sabotage. It rejected them because you do not have administrative access to the email servers. That access requires authorization from either the CEO or the Chief Technology Officer, neither of which you are." Tyler's voice rose to a volume that made other cafe patrons turn and stare. "I am the Vice President of Operations, which gives me authority over all operational systems, including your precious computers. I demand that you provide me with full administrative access immediately, or I will have you terminated for obstruction and insubordination." The disconnect between Tyler's demands and reality would have been amusing if it were not so dangerous for my colleagues and the company. I explained patiently that VP of Operations was not the same as Chief Technology Officer, and that access controls existed for legal compliance and security reasons. Tyler responded by hanging up on me, but not before shouting that he would find a way to get what he needed with or without my cooperation. 20 minutes after Tyler's tantrum, my phone exploded with messages from Jake. Tyler had called an emergency meeting with all remaining IT staff, which at this point consisted of Jake and 2 part-time interns who normally handled basic help desk tickets. According to Jake's frantic texts, Tyler spent the entire meeting explaining how modern technology companies were streamlining operations by outsourcing technical support to specialized firms that could provide better service at lower costs. Tyler announced that he had already been in contact with a company called Advanced Technical Solutions, owned by his former college roommate Brad Mitchell. Advanced Technical Solutions would take over all IT operations starting Monday, which was only 5 days away. Tyler assured everyone that the transition would be smooth and that qualified staff members might be offered positions with the new company, though probably at adjusted salary levels that reflected current market rates. Jake managed to secretly record part of the meeting using his phone. He sent me the audio file, and listening to it made my stomach turn. Tyler's voice carried the smug confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his decisions. He dismissed every question about system complexity and data security, with vague assurances that professional outsourcing companies dealt with these issues all the time. When Jake asked about the specific technical certifications and experience levels of the incoming team, Tyler became defensive. He accused Jake of trying to create unnecessary obstacles and reminded him that his own job security depended on having a positive attitude about changes that were already decided. Tyler explained that he had researched Advanced Technical Solutions thoroughly and that Brad Mitchell had assured him they could handle any challenges that might arise. The recording captured Tyler bragging about having his father's complete support for these operational improvements. Harold Branson had invested $12 million in Meridian Technologies over the past 18 months, which gave him significant influence over strategic decisions. Tyler claimed that his father specifically wanted to see technology costs reduced and operations modernized. He dismissed concerns about system stability by saying that any company still operating on legacy infrastructure in today's market was probably doing something wrong anyway. I felt my hands shaking as I listened to Tyler describe the current IT team as overpaid button pushers who had been coasting on outdated knowledge and making simple things seem complicated to justify their positions. He promised that Advanced Technical Solutions would bring fresh perspectives and modern approaches that would eliminate these inefficiencies. Jake's recording captured the most revealing moment when Tyler explained his real strategy. Any technical problems that occur during the transition will obviously be the result of poor documentation and inadequate systems left behind by the previous team. Brad's people are experts at identifying these kinds of problems and implementing proper solutions. If anything goes wrong, we will have clear evidence that the old approach was not working and that our modernization was necessary. Tyler was planning to blame any failures on my work and use those failures to justify decisions that had already been made. He intended to sabotage the transition deliberately, and then point to the sabotage as proof that his approach was correct. This was not incompetence or misunderstanding. This was calculated manipulation designed to cover up what was essentially a scheme to funnel company money to his friend's business. I immediately started digging deeper into Advanced Technical Solutions and Brad Mitchell. Their company website looked professional enough, but the case studies and client testimonials seemed generic and vague. Their staff directory listed impressive-sounding titles, but searching for the actual people revealed LinkedIn profiles with questionable experience and employment gaps. Brad Mitchell's background raised even more red flags. He had been Tyler's roommate at Stanford Business School, where both of them had focused on entrepreneurship and venture capital rather than technology. Brad's previous companies had short lifespans and unclear outcomes. One had been acquired by a larger firm under circumstances that suggested financial distress rather than success. Another had simply disappeared from business databases after 2 years of operation. Customer reviews for Advanced Technical Solutions were sparse and concerning. Several mentioned extended downtime during migrations, data recovery problems and difficulties reaching technical support when issues arose. One review specifically warned that the company seemed to bid low on contracts and then charge extensive additional fees when complications inevitably developed. My phone rang again, but this time Tyler's voice carried a different tone. He sounded nervous and slightly out of breath. "Belinda, I need you to walk me through the email system configuration. I have been trying to send important communications to department heads, and the system keeps giving me error messages about insufficient privileges." I explained once again that he did not have the necessary access rights to send company-wide communications. Tyler insisted that his position as VP of Operations automatically granted him those privileges, but I pointed out that access control systems do not work based on job titles. They work based on specific permissions that must be granted by authorized administrators. Tyler's frustration exploded into threats. "Fine, if you will not cooperate voluntarily, I will make this an official matter. I am contacting the FBI to report unauthorized access to company systems by a former employee who is currently outside the United States. You have been accessing our network remotely without permission, which constitutes cybercrimes under federal law." The accusation was absurd enough to make me laugh out loud. "Tyler, I am not a former employee. I am a current employee on authorized vacation. Remote access to company systems is part of my job responsibilities and is explicitly covered in my employment contract. You can contact the FBI if you want, but I suggest you speak with our legal department first to avoid embarrassing yourself." Tyler's voice became increasingly shrill as he realized his bluff was not working. "I have already spoken with legal, and they confirmed that your behavior constitutes insubordination and potential corporate espionage. You have 1 hour to provide me with complete administrative access to all systems, or I will have criminal charges filed against you." I knew Tyler was lying about speaking with legal because our legal department consisted of one part-time attorney who worked from home and only handled contract reviews. She would have immediately told Tyler that his demands violated multiple corporate policies and potentially exposed the company to liability. But Tyler's willingness to make false threats revealed just how desperate he had become to maintain his illusion of control. The next morning brought a series of developments that transformed Tyler's incompetence into something much more sinister. I woke up in my hotel room in Prague to find 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Jake had been trying to reach me since 3 a.m. local time, which meant Tyler had been wreaking havoc through most of the previous evening in Chicago. Tyler had locked himself in the server room and spent hours trying to manually reset system configurations using nothing but basic administrative tools and YouTube tutorials. He managed to corrupt 3 different databases before triggering automatic lockout protocols that I had designed to prevent exactly this kind of amateur interference. The lockouts meant that accounting software, customer relationship management systems, and inventory tracking were all offline. But Tyler's technical incompetence was not the real problem. Jake had discovered something much worse while helping with damage control. Tyler had been forging email communications from other executives to support his operational changes. He had created fake approval messages from CEO Patricia Walsh, who was currently traveling in Asia, and had been largely unreachable for the past week. The forged emails authorized Tyler to make personnel decisions approve vendor contracts, and access financial systems. Tyler had used these fake authorizations to expedite his outsourcing plan and justify the termination of IT staff. He had even created a fake message from Patricia Walsh, expressing disappointment in my job performance and authorizing Tyler to terminate my employment if I did not cooperate with his directives. Jake sent me screenshots of the forged emails, and they were sophisticated enough to fool anyone who did not know Patricia Walsh's communication style. Tyler had clearly studied her previous messages and mimicked her language patterns and signature formatting. The fake emails were backdated to make it appear that Patricia had been planning these changes for weeks and had simply delayed announcing them until Tyler arrived to implement them. I started digging into company financial records to understand the scope of Tyler's deception. What I found made my blood run cold. The contract with Advanced Technical Solutions was worth $3.7 million over 3 years, which was nearly triple what Meridian currently spent on IT operations. The contract included provisions for additional charges if complications arose with no clear limits on those additional costs. More disturbing was the ownership structure of Advanced Technical Solutions. Brad Mitchell was listed as CEO, but the majority shareholder was something called Branson Family Investment LLC. Harold Branson was not just supporting his son's business decisions. He was directly profiting from them through his ownership stake in the company that would receive the outsourcing contract. The financial arrangements constituted a clear conflict of interest that should have been disclosed to other board members and executives. Instead, Tyler had used forged communications to make it appear that these decisions had been thoroughly reviewed and approved by leadership who were not actually aware they were being made. I found evidence of other financial irregularities that suggested Tyler had been manipulating records for weeks. Expense reports had been altered to make current IT operations appear more costly than they actually were. Maintenance contracts had been canceled and then reported as canceled due to vendor performance issues rather than cost-cutting measures. Budget projections had been adjusted to make the outsourcing deal appear more economical than realistic analysis would support. My phone rang, and Tyler's voice sounded different again. This time he was calling from a conference room, and I could hear other people in the background. Belinda, I have Harold Branson and our legal counsel on the line. We are prepared to offer you a choice. You can provide immediate cooperation with our operational transition, or you can face criminal charges for corporate sabotage and unauthorized system access. I asked to speak directly with Harold Branson, who confirmed that he fully supported Tyler's efforts to modernize company operations. Harold explained that his investment in Meridian Technologies came with expectations for improved efficiency and reduced operational costs. He had specifically asked Tyler to identify areas where savings could be achieved without compromising business performance. When I asked Harold if he was aware of Tyler's forged email communications and the financial arrangements with Advanced Technical Solutions, the line went quiet for several seconds. Harold claimed that Tyler had been operating with his full knowledge and approval, but his hesitation suggested that Tyler might not have been entirely transparent about his methods. The legal counsel turned out to be someone I had never heard of, which was strange because Meridian's regular attorney had handled all my employment paperwork. This new lawyer immediately started making threats about federal computer crime laws and corporate espionage statutes. He claimed that my remote access to company systems while outside the United States potentially violated international cybercrime treaties. Tyler jumped back into the conversation to explain that he had hired a private investigator to track my location and gather evidence of my unauthorized activities. He claimed that I had been accessing sensitive financial data and potentially selling corporate information to competitors. These accusations were completely fabricated, but Tyler presented them with enough confidence to make them sound credible. The conversation ended with Tyler giving me a final ultimatum. I had exactly 1 hour to provide complete administrative access to all systems and return to the United States immediately, or they would contact federal authorities and have criminal charges filed. Tyler assured me that his father's connections in law enforcement would ensure that these charges were taken seriously and pursued aggressively. After ending the call, I sat in my hotel room trying to process what was happening. Tyler had escalated from incompetent micromanagement to elaborate fraud and criminal impersonation. He was systematically destroying everything I had built while enriching his family through fraudulent contracts, and he was threatening me with federal prosecution to cover up his own criminal behavior. I realized that Tyler's plan was more sophisticated than I had initially understood. He intended to create enough chaos and system failures to justify his predetermined narrative about inadequate infrastructure and poor management. He would blame these failures on my sabotage and use that blame to justify both my termination and the expensive outsourcing deal with his father's company. But Tyler had made one critical mistake in his calculations. He assumed that I would be helpless to respond from thousands of miles away. He did not realize that I had spent 5 years building redundant access systems and backup protocols specifically designed to handle crisis situations. Tyler thought he was playing chess, but he had no idea what pieces were actually on the board. The next 12 hours brought an escalation that transformed Tyler's corporate manipulation into outright personal warfare. I woke up to discover that Tyler had posted detailed accusations about me on LinkedIn, claiming that I had embezzled company funds and sabotaged critical systems before fleeing to Europe to avoid prosecution. The post included enough technical details to sound credible to anyone who did not understand system administration. Tyler had also contacted my apartment complex in Chicago, claiming to represent federal authorities investigating financial crimes. He told them that I was wanted for questioning and that my apartment might contain evidence of corporate espionage. The complex management immediately changed my locks and restricted access to my unit pending resolution of the alleged investigation. The personal attacks extended to my family. Tyler somehow obtained my parents' contact information and called them to explain that their daughter was wanted for serious federal crimes. He told them that I had stolen money from my employer and fled the country to avoid arrest. My mother called me in tears, begging me to turn myself in and promising that they would hire the best lawyer they could afford to help me. I spent an hour on the phone with my parents explaining that Tyler's accusations were completely false and that this was retaliation for my refusal to give him unauthorized access to company systems. My father, who had worked in manufacturing management for 30 years, immediately understood the dynamics of what was happening. He recognized Tyler's behavior as classic workplace bullying escalated to an extreme level. Meanwhile, Jake sent me urgent updates about the situation at Meridian Technologies. Tyler's college friend Brad Mitchell had arrived with a team of 3 technicians who claimed to be preparing for the transition. These technicians had no apparent understanding of our system architecture and immediately began making changes that threatened data integrity and security. Jake tried to explain that our database configurations required specific protocols to maintain consistency, but the incoming technicians dismissed his concerns as resistance to change. They accused Jake of deliberately creating obstacles and suggested that he was probably involved in whatever sabotage I was allegedly conducting from Europe. The situation became critical when the new technicians decided that our backup systems were unnecessarily complicated and began disabling what they called redundant processes. These backup systems were actually essential fail-safes that protected against data loss during power outages or hardware failures. Disabling them left the entire network vulnerable to catastrophic data loss if any problems occurred. Customer complaints started arriving as system performance degraded under the amateur management of Tyler's outsourcing team. Our largest client, Northwestern Manufacturing, reported that their access to inventory tracking systems had become intermittent and unreliable. 2 other major clients experienced data synchronization problems that affected their ability to process orders and track shipments. Tyler's response to these problems was to blame them on my alleged sabotage and demand that I fix them remotely to prove my innocence. He claimed that I had planted logic bombs or other malicious code that was designed to activate after I left the country. This explanation conveniently ignored the fact that all problems had started after his technicians began making unauthorized changes to system configurations. My phone rang at 2 a.m. Prague time, and Tyler's voice carried a level of desperation I had not heard before. "Belinda, you need to stop this sabotage immediately. Our clients are threatening to terminate their contracts, and my father is asking questions I cannot answer. If you do not fix these problems right now, I will personally ensure that you face the maximum possible criminal penalties." I pointed out that Tyler's own technicians had caused the problems by disabling critical systems, but he refused to accept any responsibility. Instead, he accused me of providing false technical information designed to make his team's work more difficult. He claimed that I had deliberately created unnecessarily complicated configurations to make myself appear indispensable. Tyler's desperation led him to make increasingly irrational threats. He claimed that he had contacted Interpol to have me arrested in Prague and extradited to face federal charges. He said that he had hired hackers to trace my online activities and gather evidence of corporate espionage. He even threatened to sue my parents for harboring a fugitive if they continued to support me. The conversation ended when Tyler delivered what he clearly thought was his ultimate threat. I have complete control over this situation now, and you have no power to stop what is happening. You can either cooperate completely and hope for leniency, or you can continue this resistance and face the full consequences of your criminal behavior. After hanging up, I realized that Tyler had crossed a line that transformed this conflict from a workplace dispute into something much more serious. His willingness to file false police reports, forge legal documents, and make threats against my family demonstrated that he was capable of genuinely dangerous behavior. But Tyler's escalation had also revealed the weakness in his position. His entire strategy depended on maintaining the illusion that he was acting with proper authority and that his accusations against me were credible. The more desperate he became, the more obvious it became that his claims were fabricated. I started documenting everything systematically. I recorded our phone conversations, saved screenshots of his social media posts, and gathered evidence of his forged email communications. I also began reaching out to contacts at other companies who could verify that my professional reputation was solid and that Tyler's accusations were inconsistent with my established track record. Most importantly, I started preparing my own counterattack. Tyler thought he had all the power because he controlled the corporate hierarchy and had his father's financial backing. But corporate power structures mean nothing when the person you are attacking controls the technical infrastructure that keeps the entire operation running. Tyler was about to learn that there is a difference between having authority on paper and having actual control over critical systems. He had spent weeks trying to take away my access to Meridian's network, but he had no idea that I had built multiple backup access routes that were completely invisible to anyone who did not design them. The countdown Tyler had started with his first threatening phone call was about to reach 0. And when it did, Tyler would discover that threatening the person who built your entire technical infrastructure is probably the most expensive mistake a corporate executive can make. Tyler's desperation reached its peak the following morning when he attempted to physically destroy the evidence of his own incompetence. Jake called me in a panic, explaining that Tyler had arrived at the office at 5 a.m. and immediately went to the server room with what appeared to be construction tools. According to Jake, Tyler had become convinced that I was maintaining remote access through hidden hardware that his technicians had not discovered. He decided that the only way to completely cut off my access was to physically disconnect or destroy any equipment that might be providing me with unauthorized entry points. Jake managed to maintain a video call with me while Tyler systematically attacked server equipment with a baseball bat. The destruction was both horrifying and absurd. Tyler clearly had no understanding of what any of the equipment actually did, so he was essentially attacking random components and hoping that one of them would solve his problem. The first casualty was the main cooling system controller, which Tyler apparently believed was some kind of communication device. Destroying this component triggered automatic emergency protocols that began shutting down non-essential systems to prevent overheating. Tyler interpreted these shutdowns as evidence that he had successfully disrupted my alleged sabotage, so he continued his destructive rampage with increased enthusiasm. Within minutes, Tyler had damaged enough equipment to trigger multiple alarm systems. Fire suppression systems activated when smoke detectors registered overheating components. Security cameras began recording everything as motion sensors detected unusual activity in areas that were normally accessed only during scheduled maintenance. Tyler's violent meltdown was being automatically documented by the same security systems I had installed to protect the company from external threats. Every swing of his baseball bat was captured in high-definition video that was simultaneously backed up to multiple off-site locations. The physical destruction Tyler was causing made the cooling system critical for preventing catastrophic overheating of remaining functional equipment. The servers that managed customer data, financial records, and business operations were all beginning to operate outside safe temperature ranges. Without immediate intervention, the entire system would shut down automatically to prevent permanent hardware damage. Jake was trying to explain this to Tyler, but Tyler was beyond rational communication. He accused Jake of being part of my conspiracy and threatened to destroy any equipment that Jake tried to protect. Tyler seemed to believe that everything technical was somehow connected to my alleged sabotage, and that destroying enough equipment would eventually eliminate whatever power I had over the situation. While Tyler continued his destructive rampage, I was implementing the most comprehensive response plan I had ever executed. From my hotel room in Prague, I activated every backup system, redundant connection, and emergency protocol I had spent years developing. First, I contacted CEO Patricia Walsh directly through her personal emergency contact number. Patricia was in Tokyo attending a conference, but she was immediately available when I explained that there was a critical situation at company headquarters. I sent her Jake's video footage of Tyler's violent behavior and provided detailed documentation of his forged communications and fraudulent financial arrangements. Patricia's response was immediate and decisive. She had been completely unaware of Tyler's activities because he had been intercepting and filtering her communications. She authorized me to take any action necessary to protect company systems and promised to contact Harold Branson immediately to discuss Tyler's behavior. Next, I reached out directly to every department head and major client through contact information that Tyler did not control. I provided them with factual summaries of what had been happening and assured them that the technical problems they were experiencing were caused by unauthorized changes that would be corrected immediately. I also contacted our corporate insurance company to report the damage Tyler was causing and ensure that his destructive behavior would be properly documented for liability purposes. The insurance company immediately dispatched a claims investigator and recommended that we contact local police to report the property destruction. But my most important action was activating the emergency override systems I had built into our network architecture. These systems allowed me to isolate damaged components, reroute critical processes through backup hardware, and maintain essential operations even under extreme circumstances. Tyler's physical attack on our infrastructure had actually made it easier for me to justify using these override systems. Under normal circumstances, bypassing standard access controls would require extensive authorization and documentation. But when someone was literally attacking company property with a baseball bat, emergency protocols clearly applied. From Prague, I began systematically restoring system stability, while Tyler continued his futile attempt to destroy equipment that was already being bypassed by backup systems he did not know existed. Every component he damaged was automatically replaced by redundant systems that activated seamlessly. The irony was perfect. Tyler thought he was cutting off my access to company systems, but his destructive behavior was actually triggering emergency protocols that gave me broader access than I normally had. His attack was providing me with both the justification and the technical authority to implement solutions that would completely neutralize his ability to cause further damage. Tyler's baseball bat could destroy individual servers, but it could not destroy the distributed backup systems I had spent years building. His violence was ultimately just providing dramatic evidence of his incompetence and instability, while my actual technical infrastructure continued operating smoothly around the damage he was causing. The 30-minute countdown I had mentioned in my first conversation with Tyler was finally reaching zero. But instead of systems failing, everything was about to work exactly as I had designed it to work. Tyler was about to discover that attacking someone's professional work is personal, but attacking someone's professional work with a baseball bat is both personal and stupid. Tyler's violent rampage in the server room lasted approximately 45 minutes before fire department and police arrived in response to multiple automatic emergency alerts. By that time, he had caused over $200,000 in hardware damage and triggered enough safety systems to require professional hazardous material assessment. Jake's video documentation captured Tyler's complete psychological breakdown as he realized that destroying equipment was not producing the results he expected. Systems continued operating despite his attacks, which only increased his frustration and led to more destructive behavior. The video clearly showed Tyler shouting about hidden devices and secret access points that existed only in his paranoid imagination. While emergency responders secured the building and began assessing the damage, I was orchestrating a comprehensive counterattack from my hotel room in Prague. Over the previous 6 hours, I had contacted every relevant person in positions of actual authority and provided them with complete documentation of Tyler's fraudulent activities. CEO Patricia Walsh was already on a plane back to Chicago, having cut her Asia trip short to handle what she now understood was a crisis created entirely by Tyler's unauthorized actions. She had contacted the board of directors and called an emergency meeting to address Tyler's behavior and the financial irregularities I had documented. Patricia had also contacted Harold Branson directly and informed him that his son had been forging corporate communications, manipulating financial records, and physically destroying company property. Harold's initial reaction was to defend Tyler, but Patricia's evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The evidence included not just Jake's video of Tyler's violent rampage, but also comprehensive documentation of the forged emails, the fraudulent vendor contracts, and the undisclosed financial arrangements with Advanced Technical Solutions. Patricia made it clear to Harold that Tyler's actions had exposed Meridian Technologies to significant legal liability and that immediate corrective action was required. Harold's position became even more difficult when I provided evidence that Tyler had been using his father's name and reputation to justify actions that Harold had never actually authorized. Several of Tyler's forged emails specifically claimed that Harold had personally directed certain decisions and had expressed dissatisfaction with current operations. These fabricated authorizations meant that Harold was potentially liable for Tyler's actions, even though he had not actually approved them. Tyler's use of the Branson family name in his fraudulent activities created legal exposure that could affect Harold's other business interests and investments. My phone rang, and for the first time, Harold Branson was calling me directly rather than having Tyler handle communications. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension and anger underneath his professional demeanor. "Belinda, I need to understand exactly what has been happening over the past several weeks. Tyler has been telling me that he was implementing efficiency improvements with your cooperation, and that recent problems were caused by your resistance to necessary changes." I provided Harold with a detailed timeline of Tyler's activities, including the unauthorized personnel terminations, the forged communications, the undisclosed vendor relationships, and the systematic sabotage of established systems. I also sent him Jake's video footage of Tyler's violent destruction of company property. Harold listened without interruption as I explained how Tyler had used his name to justify decisions that violated corporate policy and potentially exposed the company to criminal liability. I provided specific examples of Tyler's forged emails and showed how they had been used to manipulate other employees and vendors. The most damaging revelation was my documentation of the financial arrangements with Advanced Technical Solutions. Harold had apparently been unaware that Tyler had structured the outsourcing contract to benefit Branson Family Investment LLC, or that the contract terms were significantly more expensive than current operations. Harold's voice became increasingly strained as he realized the full scope of Tyler's deceptions. "I was not aware of most of these activities, and I certainly did not authorize the use of my name or my investment company in these contracts. Tyler appears to have been operating far beyond any authority I granted him." The conversation took a dramatic turn when Harold informed me that Tyler had been removed from company property by police and that Advanced Technical Solutions had been immediately terminated as a vendor. Harold explained that Patricia Walsh had provided him with evidence that Tyler's activities constituted fraud and that continuing to support Tyler would expose Harold to potential criminal liability. Harold's tone became apologetic as he acknowledged that Tyler's behavior had been completely unacceptable and that I had been subjected to threats and harassment that should never have occurred. He offered to personally ensure that all of Tyler's false accusations were corrected and that my professional reputation was fully restored. But the most satisfying moment came when Harold asked me to take whatever steps were necessary to restore system stability and prevent further damage to company operations. He explicitly authorized me to override any previous instructions from Tyler and to implement whatever technical solutions I believed were appropriate. Harold ended the conversation by informing me that Tyler would face both termination and potential criminal charges for his fraudulent activities. He promised that Tyler would have no further involvement with Meridian Technologies and that all employees who had been wrongfully terminated would be reinstated with full back pay and benefits. After hanging up with Harold, I spent the next 3 hours systematically restoring every system that Tyler and his incompetent technicians had damaged or compromised. From my hotel room in Prague, I rebuilt database configurations, restored security protocols, and reactivated all the backup systems that had been foolishly disabled. The technical work was straightforward because I had designed everything with exactly this kind of recovery scenario in mind. But the emotional satisfaction of watching Tyler's destructive efforts being completely reversed was beyond anything I had experienced in my professional career. By the time I finished the restoration work, Meridian Technologies was operating more efficiently than it had before Tyler arrived. The crisis had actually provided me with justification to implement several system improvements that I had been planning but had not yet had time to execute. Tyler's attempt to destroy my work had ultimately made my work stronger and more resilient. His violence had provided the documentation needed to expose his fraudulent activities. His threats had given me the moral authority to take decisive action, and his incompetence had demonstrated the value of everything he had tried to eliminate. The 30-minute countdown I had mentioned in our first phone call was finally complete, but instead of systems failing, everything was working perfectly. Tyler had succeeded only in destroying his own credibility and career while providing me with the most comprehensive professional vindication I could have imagined. The aftermath of Tyler's destruction brought changes to Meridian Technologies that transformed the company in ways I had never imagined possible. When I finally returned from Prague 1 week later, I found an organization that had learned valuable lessons about the importance of technical infrastructure and the dangers of nepotism in leadership positions. CEO Patricia Walsh personally met me at the office on my first day back, and her gratitude was both genuine and professionally significant. She explained that Tyler's crisis had revealed vulnerabilities in corporate oversight that went far beyond the IT department. The board of directors had implemented new policies requiring independent verification of all major operational changes and background checks for any executive positions filled through investor recommendations. Patricia offered me the position of Chief Technology Officer, which came with a substantial salary increase, equity participation, and authority over all technology-related decisions. The CTO role included board meeting participation and input on strategic planning, which meant I would have direct influence over company direction rather than just implementing decisions made by others. All employees who had been wrongfully terminated by Tyler were reinstated with full back pay benefits, restoration, and formal apologies. Sarah returned as my executive assistant with a promotion and salary increase that reflected her loyalty during Tyler's harassment campaign. Jake was promoted to senior network administrator with expanded responsibilities and professional development support. Dave from Network Security came back as Director of Information Security, a new position that Patricia created to ensure that cybersecurity would never again be treated as an optional expense. Angela returned to lead an expanded database management team that would implement enhanced data protection protocols across all company operations. The financial implications of Tyler's fraud were ultimately resolved in our favor. Harold Branson personally covered all hardware replacement costs and agreed to extended contract terms that protected Meridian Technologies from any attempt to recover the money that had been paid to Advanced Technical Solutions. Harold also contributed additional funding for infrastructure improvements as compensation for the disruption Tyler had caused. Tyler himself faced multiple criminal charges, including fraud, forgery, destruction of property, and making false statements to federal authorities. His attempt to file false FBI reports backfired when investigators discovered his fabricated evidence and concluded that he had been attempting to use federal law enforcement to cover up his own criminal activities. Brad Mitchell and Advanced Technical Solutions were investigated for conspiracy and bid rigging. Their company lost several other contracts when clients learned about their involvement in Tyler's fraudulent scheme. Brad faced civil litigation from investors who had been deceived about the company's legitimate business prospects. But the most personally satisfying outcome was the transformation of company culture around technology and technical expertise. Patricia Walsh implemented training programs for all executives to ensure they understood basic technology concepts and could make informed decisions about technical matters. No one would ever again be able to terrorize technical staff through ignorance disguised as authority. I used my new CTO position to build the kind of technical organization I had always envisioned. We hired experienced professionals, invested in cutting-edge equipment, and implemented security protocols that exceeded industry standards. our technical infrastructure became a competitive advantage that helped Meridian Technologies win new clients and expand into new markets. The backup systems and emergency protocols that had saved the company during Tyler's rampage became the foundation for a disaster recovery capability that was recognized as best in class within our industry. Other companies began asking us to consult on their own infrastructure resilience planning. 6 months later, Meridian Technologies received a regional award for operational excellence and innovative technology management. Patricia Walsh specifically mentioned my leadership during the Tyler crisis as an example of how technical expertise combined with ethical courage could protect organizational values and ensure business continuity under extreme circumstances. The personal attacks Tyler had made against my family and professional reputation were completely reversed through public acknowledgement of the truth. Professional organizations that Tyler had contacted with false information received detailed corrections and documentation of what had actually occurred. My LinkedIn profile and professional references were fully restored and enhanced. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the power of preparation and the importance of building systems that can withstand both technical failures and human sabotage. The redundant access routes, backup protocols, and emergency overrides that I had spent years developing proved their value when I needed them most. Tyler had taught me that technical competence without political awareness is vulnerable to manipulation by people who understand corporate power structures. But he had also demonstrated that political power without technical competence is ultimately ineffective against someone who controls the infrastructure that makes everything possible. The experience reinforced my belief that standing up to workplace bullies is not just about personal dignity, but about protecting the professional standards and ethical values that make good work possible. Tyler's attempt to destroy my career had actually strengthened my commitment to building technology systems that serve human needs rather than corporate manipulation. Looking back, I realized that Tyler's threats and harassment had forced me to develop skills and confidence that I might never have discovered under normal circumstances. Defending myself against his attacks had required me to become a stronger advocate for technical excellence and professional integrity. The story of Tyler's destruction and ultimate defeat became part of Meridian Technologies' corporate culture. New employees learned about the importance of questioning authority when that authority contradicts technical reality and professional standards. The Tyler crisis became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing hierarchy over expertise. In the end, Tyler had succeeded only in proving that technical infrastructure is more powerful than corporate politics when the two come into conflict. His baseball bat could damage individual servers, but it could not destroy the knowledge, skills, and professional relationships that make technical systems possible. Have you ever faced a situation where someone in authority tried to undermine your professional expertise or threaten your career because they did not understand your work? Standing up to workplace bullies can be terrifying, especially when they have powerful connections and are willing to make threats. But sometimes the most important battles are the ones where we defend not just ourselves, but the professional standards that protect everyone in our field. The Tyler crisis taught me that technical competence, combined with ethical courage, can overcome even the most determined attempts at corporate manipulation. When someone attacks your professional work, they are not just attacking you personally, they are attacking the standards and values that make good work possible for everyone. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with anyone who might be dealing with similar workplace challenges. Subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for professional integrity and protecting the technical systems that keep our world running. Thank you for listening, and remember that your expertise and dedication matter more than corporate politics and family connections. Stay strong and keep building systems that serve human needs rather than human greed.